This is Free Thinking Through the Fourth Turning. My name is Sasha Stone. I have a little bit of a cold in addition to my injuries I sustained while on my road trip. But if you can stand it, I can. Joe Biden's eternal nightmare. All the lawfare in the world can't make Joe Biden a better candidate. Don't let Joe Biden's creepy grin fool you. He's not confident. He's terrified. They all are. Imagine being them right now. Imagine having all of this power, all of the culture, all of the institutions, and most of the administrative and security state. Imagine the impeachments, the indictments, the endless attacks against Trump for 8 years, and he's still the frontrunner to be president of the United States in 2024. For podcast listeners, a Real Clear Politics poll that shows Trump pulling ahead, just ahead of Joe Biden. Biden knows the system might help him win in 2024, just as it did in 2020. He has to keep the threat of Trump alive, and he may convince low-information voters to pull the lever for Joe. Nothing makes that easier than calling Trump a convicted felon. Yes, they finally got there. They've done everything they can to stop Trump short of assassination, and they're probably kicking themselves now for not going that far early on. The truth is that they underestimated Trump's courage and resolve. Trump is a fighter through and through, and he's not giving up, even if they throw him in jail. The funny thing is, all they had to do to stop Trump was offer the people something better, or even acknowledge them. The problems after the Wall Street bailout in 2008, which sparked two populist movements on the left and the right, sent a message to our government that the people's needs were no longer being met, and that they didn't want to spend their days wasting away to keep the rich and powerful comfortable. Instead of addressing that, under the Obama administration, America slipped into a woke-topia. Critical race theory proliferated in public schools and on college campuses. The rise of social media allowed ideas to spread more quickly into the minds and hearts of the young. Fanaticism moved too fast to be stopped, and by 2016 it was our new way of life. It felt like we'd remade our country into the shining city on the hill it was always meant to be, because this time it wouldn't be to serve white men. This time everyone had a seat at the table. Now the fate of that once mighty Obama coalition rests in the hands of Joe Biden, and he's fumbling the ball. The fanaticism wasn't caused by Trump, but he threatened its survival. What if they didn't want to live in a fundamentalist country where everyone has to watch everything they say, and we're all judged not by the content of our character, but by our skin color, and our devotion to the cause of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Too bad, they said. You have to accept this new way of doing things, or else we'll call you racists. And that's what they did to Trump and MAGA, and what they're still doing, despite Trump's gaining among Black and Hispanic voters. Racism was the evil that sparked the mass hysteria, along with rape, two of the spectral charges leveled at Trump. They believe their lawfare will somehow make them or Joe Biden more appealing. It won't. They believe in terrorizing the non-compliant public by showing them just how far they'll go with a former president. If they can do that to him, imagine what they can do to you. They are not giving Americans any other option but to choose their woke-topia or Trump. They don't call them show trials for nothing. They exist as a form of intimidation to an unhappy citizenry. Say nothing, love Big Brother, do not complain or criticize us. We merely have to point and accuse, and down you go. Juries are never fair when mass hysteria grips society like it has the ruling class. How could they be? Trump has to be guilty because they've compared him to Hitler. If you don't convict, you will be responsible for the end of democracy. If the New York Times, the Washington Post, or a person of high stature smacked them down for their abuse of power, they would shrink away in shame. But no one ever did. Instead, we get phony gaslighting day in and day out. All of these so-called experts and professionals and journalists explaining why all of this they've thrown at Trump is rational and justified. The felony conviction is all for show. There is no there. And if any reasonable court ggets their hands on it, they will smack down all involved. Democrats know this. Here's a nonpartisan lawyer laying out just why Trump's case is unconstitutional and why it will blow up in their faces. But of course they know that too. They just want to win in 2024, to spare Joe Biden the humiliation of losing to Trump.
A lot of lawyers say that this whole prosecution was unconstitutional. What are their arguments, and do those arguments have any merit? Well, the first thing a lot of people say is, you know what? This prosecution would never have been brought if it hadn't been against Donald Trump. We think that Alvin Bragg, the district attorney, we think that he brought this case because he's pursuing a vendetta against Trump. Hates his policies, doesn't want him to be president. The whole point of the prosecution, people say, is to undermine Trump's chances of being president. Well, if that's true, does that make the prosecution unconstitutional? Answer, yes, it would. That's called, in legal terms, selective prosecution. The state cannot come after you with a criminal prosecution because of hostility toward or in retaliation against your political activity. That's unconstitutional. And if they're doing that, the whole prosecution is unconstitutional. Well, the problem here, though, is that's very difficult to prove. That gets into the motives inside the head of the prosecutor. Very tough to prove. In fact, some courts have held the only way you can prove it is by coming up with a comparable case, a comparator, a comparable case of somebody else that the district attorney could have prosecuted on very similar facts, but didn't prosecute because the district attorney liked their politics, but didn't like Trump's politics. Very hard to come up with a set of comparable facts like that. Believe it or not, there might be a comparator here. There might be a very similar, comparable set of facts involving Hillary Clinton. But that's going to get into too much factual detail that I don't have time for on today's show. Maybe in another show, I'll talk more about that. So, constitutional issue number one is selective prosecution. A lot of people think this was an instance of selective prosecution, and there is some pretty good reason to believe it, but difficult to prove. Now let's turn to issue two, the indictment. I told you before, the indictment charged Trump with a two-step crime, falsifying business records to conceal a second crime, but never said what that second crime was. Is that constitutional? Well, under the United States Constitution, under the Sixth Amendment, every criminal defendant has a right to know the charges against him. So how does that principle work in this kind of case? And I'll answer it by quoting from a federal case. The court was the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, and here's what the Second Circuit said. Where an indictment charges a crime that depends in turn on violation of another statute, the indictment must identify the underlying offense. That sounds kind of relevant, doesn't it? I'm going to repeat it to you. Where an indictment charges a crime that depends in turn on violation of another statute, the indictment must identify the underlying offense. Well, that's exactly what this indictment did. Charged a crime that depended in turn on the violation of another statute, but it didn't specify or identify the underlying offense. Now, there's a very good argument that that indictment was in violation of federal constitutional law under this Second Circuit case and many other cases that are like it.
Sooner or later, cancel culture was going to get into the courts. Just look at how prominent Democrats like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders forced out Al Franken to resign with no due process. Put the court cases in a blue city, add one of their triggers, add a black prosecutor to get the white man, mix in some rape and infidelity for the ladies of The View to pearl clutch like there was never splooge on the intern's dress in the Oval Office. And a guilty verdict is forthcoming. The Democrats embrace their inner fascist. It turns out that after all their complaining about it, the Democrats realize that fascism isn't so bad after all. I mean, who needs fair trials and all that? Isn't it just easier to accuse people of things? Do we really need due process? Do we need freedom of speech? Do we even need justice and the rule of law? I mean, isn't Rachel Maddow's opinion enough? An angry mob on Twitter instead of a jury? Turns out lurching toward fascism is easy, just like lying to the people is easy. It will be a bloodbath. He's a dictator. Those who exist in the ruling class will never dare challenge those lies, just as they will never challenge what is obvious corruption of the criminal justice system. They trot out Adam Schiff to sound smart and Joy Behar pees her pants in Costco while buying Keurig coffee. Stephen King can finally sleep at night. Rob Reiner can spend what's left of his life persecuting Christians. It's a win-win. Maybe we don't even need elections. Fascism. That's the answer. People don't turn to fascism for nothing. They land there when their desire to hold on to power is bigger than anything else they ever stood for. That's where the Democrats are now. They won't stop until they are stopped, and we must stop them. Here are some TikTok users for Trump.
I just got 3 things to say. God bless our troops. God bless America. And gentlemen, start your engine!
This is your man.
Yes,
Look at the screen.
that's mine.
As a Middle Eastern immigrant, I saw this verdict coming from day one. And you want to pay attention to what I'm about to say because this is coming from experience. You got a judge whose daughter is collecting millions of dollars for the Democratic Party. You have a DA who's backed by Soros, who's been campaigning for years to take down Trump. Just connect the dots here. This was 100% political. People like myself flee our countries and come to the United States for a better life. Whether it's from poverty, political prosecution, or government corruption. And unfortunately, people who are campaigning in the name of democracy are doing the complete opposite. You may be happy right now because this is happening to Donald Trump, but if this becomes a norm, we have a huge problem. And imagine, if they can do something like this to someone who's as powerful as Donald Trump, what they can do to you. And you'll end up like us, wanting to flee your country to somewhere else for a better life.
I have to tell you something else. Had this trial been on television, and had the public been allowed to see how Judge Marchant manipulated this case and rigged the outcome of the case, in my opinion, I think even more people who are on the fence, people like me, people who have voted Democrat in the past but have open minds, I think a lot of people would have been influenced to cast a protest vote against this proceeding and proceedings like it if it had been on television, but it wasn't. And so what we have is these silos, people who watch the trial through the prism of MSNBC, where the people were dancing in the aisles and screaming up and down, what a great day, what a great victory it is for justice. So, and if you watch it on other channels, you would have a different result. And now the president has weighed in, and the president made a statement today, which I fundamentally disagree with. He said, no, don't say that the justice system or this case was rigged. We have to all support our justice system. No, we don't, Mr. President. No, we don't. Don't tell me how I ought to assess the American legal system. I know the American legal system a lot better than you do. And it's deeply flawed. If I were living in South Carolina in 1940s, I would be obviously condemning the all-white legal system that was imposing Jim Crow. I'm not making analogies here, but I especially have a responsibility to tell the truth about the legal system. I'm not going to listen to you, Mr. President. No. Actually, in this instance, Trump is right and you're wrong. This case was rigged. And I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it over and over again. This case was rigged from the very beginning.
Hold on. Let me get this straight. So a lot of you narcissistic social media influencers, along with mainstream media and the Democrat Party, are trying to convince me, gaslight me and the American people about what we're seeing. In one motion, Joe Biden can't be charged with crimes because of his old age, mental capacity, and memory loss. But yet he can still run for presidency in 2024 and be president after that if he wins. Then you further gaslight me in trying to convince me that it's Donald J. Trump with the mental capacity issues and memory loss, but charge his ass with his crimes and keep him from running in 2024 so he can't be president in 2025. Do I got that right? You see, where I come from, we call that shit. And I swear, if you Democrats didn't have any double standards, you wouldn't have no standards at all. I said what the I said. Y'all just mad Trump's gonna be your daddy in 2025.
Those who support contorting the law to get Trump like to tell us that nobody's above the law. I don't think you'll find a Republican who would disagree with that statement. The problem is the prosecution of the president's political opponent right before an election, by the way, using a mechanism never before utilized by a state prosecutor in any state in the nation, ever. And then behaving as though this is normal and as though this is holding everybody to the same standard when it clearly is not.
President Trump, you're the man, bro. It is a damn travesty what they're doing to you. I'll be donating to you, my man. Let's get it done.
So as someone who's been fairly critical of Donald Trump from the right, there were a lot of things he said and did while in office that I disagreed with. I don't think I've ever seen a more egregious miscarriage of justice than this. You had a prosecutor that ran his entire campaign on putting him in jail. You had people from the Biden administration present at the trial. You had a judge that told the jury, hey, you don't need a unanimous decision to convict him. You only need 4 guilty votes. And you had the state of New York go back and change the law so that this was no longer outside the statute of limitations. An unbiased person can take a look at this and say it's clearly a witch hunt. But what's hilarious is this is backfiring on them in a major way. It's like that scene from Star Wars when Obi-Wan tells Darth Vader when they're fighting, if you strike me down now, I'll become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. I'm not just talking out my rear end either. After the verdict broke, his donation site crashed from too much traffic.
Y'all, so I really don't speak on politics. I just leave the political situations to the political people. But y'all, Donald Trump is now a felon. The first president ever to be a felon. Like, I feel some type of way, like a good type of way, because, baby, you is badass. Like, what? Like, he always been funny, but now, baby, you going to jail, baby? Like, you got to turn yourself in soon, baby. Donald Trump, baby, I love you so much. Like, I'm sorry for everything I ever said about you, even though you didn't hear it because you don't even know who I am. But, baby, you so badass. Like, Donald Trump, you just did your big one. Like, oh, my God. Like, yes, I need him to be president again. I ain't never in my life seen a badass. I mean, it ain't never been a badass president. We got one that, shut up, be quiet. We just talking about Trump, baby. Donald Trump, if you see this, I love you so bad. Like,
what, you thought because he was convicted? You thought because of the sham bullshit trial that I wasn't going to step out the next day rocking my finest Trump shirt and my MAGA cap?
And a lot of my audience wishes I was. I've been a sharp critic of Donald Trump through his entire administration, not for the reasons that the corporate press is a critic of Donald Trump, for different reasons. But look, this is just so obvious. I mean, for anybody who's being honest with themselves, look at this. This is a maybe misdemeanor that it's a glorified misdemeanor that they've turned into 34 felonies. It is totally appalling. This is a result of the justice system being weaponized, and they had this in New York where they know, I mean, getting a jury to convict Donald Trump in New York is pretty easy. People hate his guts there. And it's a major moment in the history of the United States of America. You know, one of the things that I hear a lot of Trump critics will say, which to me is the most, you ever hear the red pill, blue pill analogy? Like, in the Matrix, you either have the red pill or the blue pill. It's the most blue pilled thing I've ever heard, where they go, no president is above the law. You go, except all of them are.
What scares them is something we can see around us every day. Celebrities are liked less. No one is watching the movies or reading the news. Their fear and desperation are about holding on to what they had, what is now a crumbling empire slipping through their fingers. From Convicted by the Rational State by Glenn Elmers and John Marini, quote, Donald Trump's criminal conviction in New York last week must be understood in terms of a political war that has been going on since Watergate. This 50-year fight between the American people and an increasingly powerful ruling class is the last stage of a project that began over a century ago, when progressive intellectuals imported German political science into America with the explicit aim of transforming the Constitution. In place of representative government, chosen by the sovereign American people, a new ruling class claimed superior intellectual authority, derived from rational empirical science and its methodology. The Constitution may continue to exist in name, but it has mostly been replaced by an administrative state of bureaucratic experts. Trump is the greatest threat to this ruling class since Richard Nixon. He has therefore aroused more raw political passion than anyone in recent memory. Making him a convicted felon is a calculated gamble to keep him from returning to the White House. There is a risk it could backfire, but the ruling class knows that Trump is entirely alone in the political establishment. He has the support of millions of voters, almost certainly a plurality of American people, but he is opposed by virtually all of the influential social, economic, political, and cultural interest groups that determine the outcome of elections." End quote. Joe Biden can't lose. Nothing they do to Trump can make Biden a better option. That's the part they still don't seem to get. A better candidate in 2016 would have made it easier to mount a strong offense. By 2020, though, Joe Biden was the chosen one. He's not giving that up for anything, not even the American people.
Oh, it's party time, huh? It's a celebration. Everybody laughing and kikiing. Oh, he's guilty. You know what the reality of it is? It doesn't even matter. You haven't changed anybody's mind. The only thing that's changed is that every minute of every day, they'll be calling him a convicted felon. And it still won't matter. You know why? Because it doesn't negate the fact that Joe Biden fucking sucks. His administration sucks. His policies suck. We barely have a border. People are struggling, can't afford groceries. Nobody's buying homes. Biology is non-existent, apparently. Illegal immigrants are being prioritized over American citizens, over military veterans. And it's sick. And so nobody cares about a bullshit conviction. Nobody cares about him being a convicted felon. It doesn't change the fact. And I wish I had a more eloquent or articulate way to convey my point, but Joe Biden fucking sucks. His VP is a fucking airhead, and she sucks as well. It's like people are tired of Democrats and Democratic policies. Crime out of control. Homelessness out of control. The amount of people that are hooked on and dying from fentanyl out of control. The fact that Biden is constantly talking about how the economy is strong and nobody else feels it. People have been pushed to the brink. People are tired. So, I mean, round of applause. Congratulations. All you've done is put a battery in the back of every Trump supporter in this country.
Boring old Joe, company man Joe, go nowhere Joe was finally somebody when he became Obama's wingman. Still, when he was called upon to save this country from a Hitler-esque figure, he rose to a level of greatness he never could have imagined was in store for him at the end of his long career as a swamp creature. Joe Biden has never been more afraid than he is right now. The end of his career can't be the tragedy that he was the guy they chose to save them from Trump, only to fail on the job and allow Trump back. Do you think Biden has any limits on what he would do to prevent that from happening? He has no checks on his power. The New York Times, MSNBC, CNN, and the Washington Post all have his back. He knows that. His just watch me promise means he'll do whatever he wants, and no one will dare stand up to him. He knows where the bodies are buried. He knows how to skim off the top and evade responsibility. He's at the end of his life and his career. There's nothing they can do to him. He's been deemed too old and too feeble to stand trial. But more than that, he is going along with the wild-eyed fanatics who control his administration and dream of yet more absolute power. This is what the 2020 election is really about. It isn't about these two candidates. It's about what this country will be going forward. But the one thing we know for sure is that the desperate and unprecedented lengths that Democrats have had to resort to remove Trump in 2020 and stop him from winning in 2024 has left the American people holding the bag. What about what we want? Don't we matter at all in a so-called democracy? No. As Martin Gurry writes, quote, "The whole process stinks of desperation. If the progressive elites who run the Biden administration felt confident they could defeat Trump at the polls, we would hear Homeric laughter ringing from the White House and its pet organs in the news media. But Biden is terribly unpopular, even among his base. America's elites fear and mistrust the American voter. They have lost faith in democracy, a system that in 2016 delivered the power of the presidency to the monstrous Trump. And they dream of a rising class of platonic guardians, people exactly like themselves with the right pedigree, the right opinions, the right manners, who rule not because they have won an electoral lottery, but in perpetuity, as a reward for their superior virtue. And the progressive elites have turned their backs on representative democracy and now seek an aristocracy of virtue. The forms will remain the same, but the substance, with a wink and a nudge, will respect caste and breeding, end quote. This is the moment to draw the line and say, not on my watch. We might not have as much power as they do, but our power as American citizens is not nothing. We're still meant to be a government for the people, by the people, and of the people. Vote for decency. After 2016, the Hillary army fractured into groups. Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Michael Bloomberg. But I chose Joe Biden. I was among a small group of online influencers who put our faith in Joe as the only person who could unseat a one-term president with a strong economy. I believed in Biden as a decent man. My father had died from dementia a year earlier, and I believed I saw the same decency in Joe. I defended the accusations of harassment and assault and of racism. I knew he was too frail and gentle-spoken for Trump's attacks to work. And most of all, I knew voters trusted him because he was the Veep for 8 years. I even made this video tribute.
To Joe Biden. The scrappy kid from Scranton who became Delaware's favorite son. You were the first decision I made as a nominee, and it was the best. Not just because you have been a great vice president, but because in the bargain I gained a brother. And we love you and Jill like family, and your friendship has been one of the great joys of our lives.
But I was wrong about Joe Biden. I was wrong about Hillary Clinton. I believed in them. I believed they were good people and ethical politicians. But they've destroyed themselves and anything they might have stood for in their obsession with bringing down Trump. I can't believe I am a Trump supporter now. I know most of my friends will never forgive me for that. And when I think about how hard that is, I think about Trump. I think about what he's gone through and how he remains optimistic in the face of it. And I know that optimism is exactly what this country needs to finally end the long, dark winter of Joe Biden and the Democrats. They have nothing to sell to the American people that they want. They can't sell hope or optimism. They can't sell a better country. All they can do is wall themselves off in their castle in the sky and pretend the cries for help down below are nothing more than white noise. Thank you for listening to my podcast, sashastone.substack.com. And if I make it home, it will be a miracle. I hope you're all having a great week. And remember, to thine own self be true.
trouble, everybody know what you've been through. From the bloody cross on top of Calvary to the beach at Malibu. Everybody knows it's coming apart. Take one last look at this sacred heart before it blows. And everybody